And I told you the men were not going to, disappoint. All of these stories have just been, it's so empowering. And now you see why I chose these particular people, because they have got something really great to share with you all about the experiences that they've gone through and how they have been able to overcome them. So this next guest, a lot of these people I've just like newly met, and I feel like I've known them forever. But this guy, he feels like an old friend. Kevin McLemore, and I hope I pronounced that correctly. Kevin's story is one that started off as a child in poverty in Dayton, Ohio. He's one of 13 children with a mother that was absent from his life from the time that he was 3 years old. Kevin would tell you that he learned everything he'd ever need to know about life by playing high school football. But he was also told that he had ADD and ADHD. But he was also told that life rewards actions. Your actions will either make your life or your actions will cost you your life. And in his book, The Indispensable Game of X's and O's, he writes to reach out to people from all walks of life who feel a sense of hopelessness and they're looking for some kind of a sign that there is hope for them. Kevin is best known as a motivator. By reputation, he's constantly reinventing himself to his environment and is consistently delivering his message both to young and old to believe that anything in life is possible as long as you have great vision and willing to put in the hard work. Kevin, welcome to the show. So your book is compelling. And just in the little bit that I have read, I love how you write. And I love how you were able to tell your story and weave in some historical context of growing up Black in the inner city, the issues of the Black family. You share a wealth of wisdom between your father and grandfather. Not many of us have people in our lives that will pour into our lives in that way, even as much to remember half of the stuff they're going to tell us. But I can see in you that you kept those words close to your heart, and they were your foundation, so that whenever you got lost, you knew what to come back to. In your book, you talk about being a young man and the Kevin you exhibited in public and the one in your head didn't sync. They're like two people operating at cross purposes, sharing one mind. So you seem to be in conflict with yourself. Tell us what that conflict was and why.
Well, first, let me say, I want to say thank you for the opportunity. I am following some terrific people. I was almost speechless listening to some of their conversations, and I'm honored and privileged. And for the people that we have that knows us personally that tuned in, I want to say thank you. The other thing I wanted to say, you mentioned that I grew up poor. I didn't know I was poor. So the one thing I learned very early on from my grandfather, there is a physical you that's in your environment, and then there's a mental you. Never did I know until I got to college and I had a rich roommate that I was poor. So I never had poor thoughts. And the fact is, when you look at the fact of growing up in a dysfunctional family, my mother made a choice that I don't know if I could have made when I had children, but she made the best choice for her. So I'm very proud of my mother, even though it wasn't the decision that I would have made for mine. But it takes a very good big person to realize that there's a life that they need to lead, and they made choices. And my father, he had made some choices that weren't popular with me, but the one thing he did, and I think this is very positive, especially in the Black community, that a man needs to stay around to show his sons what it's like to be a man. Mm-hmm. So all the characteristics that weren't exactly the characteristics that I adopted, he showed me what I didn't want to be. But the one thing is, my father was a beautiful man. He had a great big smile, and everyone loved him. He had a great sense of humor. So no matter what people talked about his shortcomings, all I looked at is his strengths. And that strength gave me the ability to become the person I was. Now, when you talk about the choices and me being at crossroads, I grew up very angry. You know, when I came home from the third grade and found out that my mother had moved to Beverly Hills 90210 and my father had got custody of us, and shortly after, not being able to pay his mortgage, moved us in to his childhood home, my grandparents. But my father put me in a great place. Put me in a great place where there was wisdom, there was love. My grandparents were wonderful. I had a great group of brothers and sisters that, although that we grew up in poverty, we didn't know we were poor. We had love. And that's one thing when you look at the foundation that you build on, when you build a foundation of what you can do versus what you don't have, life is great. And the turning point when I talk about the crossroads is that in my household, I was Kevin McLemore, brother to Dwayne, Dwight, Daria, Raymond, Anthony, Teresa, and I can go on. But when I hung out with my friends, I was Kevin McLemore in the streets. And when I was transferred from the summer of my 8th grade year, I had defended the honor of a young man in my neighborhood that had been beaten up and robbed on his paper route. And then several weeks later, after retaliating, given our version of street justice, went to one of those parties. You know, the parties, I don't know if you remember, when you went down to the basement, the lights were turned down low and so forth, and you stood in the back doing your little thing, whatever, trying to keep the attention of Vanessa Birdsong, the cutest girl at our high school at that time. Came down the steps, a couple of guys that, you know, had bad intentions. These were the guys you normally didn't invite to a party, but they showed up. And with them was the one guy that we had challenged, that we had given our version of street justice, pulled up his chest to mine, I put up to his. He pushed and I pushed him back. Someone broke us up and asked us to take it outside, and we were all ready, put it up. That's the way we used to do in the streets. Unbeknownst to me, they pulled out guns and knives. And luckily for me, my childhood friend Paul Moore and I decided we were going to take off running, zigzagging through. We hopped over the public school fence. And, you know, this is also in my book, lay down in the girls' bathroom. And all I can remember is the pop and feeling the cement falling out around us. Understanding that we had no way out, I decided the only way we were going to get out, I'm not going to stand here and wait for them to climb the fence and find us. I decided to exit. Paul followed me right behind. But I discovered two things about myself. And we'll all get to these crossroads every now and then when we make a decision to go right, left, or just there. I found out two things. One, I had world-class speed because I outran Paul. And I promised myself if I can get home without any bullets, I was going to change my life. And part of changing my life was changing surroundings and people that I was surrounded with. And that gave me an opportunity when I got to high school, is sitting in a gym class with our coach Russo. That little short guy had a very short, thick accent. When he asked how many of the young men were going to play freshman football, I watched all the other young men raise up their hand, you know, like they were going to play football. I had never played football in my life. I never watched it. I grew up in a baseball home. And then I gazed into the eyes of another pretty girl, Pam Jones, light skin, beautiful hair, light brown eyes, whatever. She looked over at me, and all I can think of, she goes, "Oh yeah, they're playing football." And little did I know, my hand just raised right up. And the surprising thing is, I went 2 weeks of going to football practice, never showed up for one practice. Came home and made the biggest mistake of my life. Told my dad I played football. Little did I know 2 weeks afterwards that I was supposed to come home dirty. My father decided with his best friend, because his best friend's son played football, to give me a ride to football practice. Two things my parents didn't allow in the house: liars and thieves. Okay, I'm going to tell you, you know, and one thing I didn't want to do is find out how my father really felt about a liar. So when he dropped me down at Grace A. Green, just before the car rolled to a stop, I was already out running. Ran down the hill. Coach Russo looked at me. I said, "Mr. Russo," and my dad found out that I lied to him, he would kill me. I told him I was on the football team. Coach Russo looked up the hill because Grace A. Green sat in a little valley. My father looked at him, and I know to this very day, my father knew I was lying. Coach Russo knew I had lied to my father, but somehow back then they connected. Coach Russo waved to my father, told me go over there and run with the rest of the boys. Changed my life. I became dedicated, commitment to my work. So when you talk about being at a crossroad, there's the crossroad will take you away from your dream, and
Yeah,
then the crossroad that will take you to your dream.
that's so true. That
That
is
is
so
dream
true.
big.
And that's how you were introduced into playing football.
I knew nothing about football. I will tell you.
And changed your life. Wow. Wow.
That was smart.
Oh, wow. So let me ask you then about, because I know you had met, and we talked before, and we talked about, different Phoenix moments that you've had in your life. Why don't you share with us one of those, one or two of those Phoenix moments in your life?
Well, this is going to sound strange. Where I'm at today, and with this book, I knew from the third grade on that I was going to be in this moment right now. I knew one day I was going to have this interview and talking about this book. Okay, from the third grade on, my whole life has been following this path. Some days I was on, some days I was off. But the one Phoenix moment that I had when I was 35 years of age, my mother came back into my life. I had spent my whole entire childhood life, my adult life, telling everyone my mother was dead, because that's how I dealt with not wanting to become a statistic. I didn't want to become another Black African American child that came from a broken home. So it was easier for me to say she was not in existence, and it was easier for me to cope with the fact that I came from a broken home. Well, when my mother showed back up, the reality came back in that I had lied to a lot of people that I cared about. And one of the things is, like, again, liars and thieves weren't accepted, and I was a liar, okay, and had to come to terms with that. My father died 10 years ago. And when my mother came back in my life, my brothers and sisters all reconnected with her. And at that time, I had started a family of my own. And I just said, right then I didn't need a mother. But when my father died, I looked at my brothers and sisters gathered around my mother. She had lost her ex. My mother still loved my father, even though they had been divorced for I don't know how many years. But I asked myself two things. I said, I can either wait till I'm standing over her coffin and cry crocodile tears for a woman I didn't know, or get to know the woman that I knew today. And my mother was a dynamic person. She marched with Martin Luther King, started a company called Action Incorporated to do the civil rights movement. So now you know the conversation that you and I've had about what's going on.
Yeah.
And she was a dynamic woman. So I've got her blood in me. And so I decided every Sunday we're going to talk after church. And I would call and I would have surface conversation. At the end of the conversation, she would always say, love you. So I was going through a personal situation when I didn't know if I was in or out. And I called my mother on Saturday. Called her, we were talking, whatever. She gave me some great sound advice. I needed my mom. I felt like a little 8-year-old kid and wanted to talk to my mom. And again, my mother said, I loved her. She loved me. And I said, mm-hmm. And she goes, it never fails, sweetheart. You always seem to throw a sucker punch at me. And that hit me hard. And I thought about it. And I said, something? I love you too. So I'm sitting in a parking lot. I called home to my better half and I told her what had happened. I said, just got off the phone talking to my mother. And she goes, okay, why are you calling her? It's a Saturday. And I said, I needed to talk. I said, I didn't know if I wanted to stay in this relationship or not. And she gave me some sound advice. And she goes, so what's the big deal? And I said, my mother said she loves me. And she goes, your mother always says she loves me. And I said, but I loved her. And she goes, what's wrong with that? I said, this time I meant it.
Wow, look at that.
And I've got a great relationship with my mother. Great relationship.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
And that's why I said, as individuals, we spend our whole life hanging on to crap that doesn't even matter. We hold on to bad relationships where people don't even realize that they've got so much power and control over you. You can't move forward if you're constantly looking backwards. That's the reason why the mirror in your car, in the reverse, is smaller. Your opportunity is out here.
There. Yes. Yeah. I love that. Let me ask you, okay, so you said even at the age of 3, you knew that you were going to have this interview. You knew you were going to write this book. So at the age of 3, you had a vision, you had a dream, you felt this inner knowing, like your life was going to be bigger and that you were going to affect a lot of people. And I can relate with that, because I've got to tell you, when I was young, my dream was that I was going to be a television newscaster. Like I was going to be the one delivering the news at 6 o'clock in the evening, right? And, but here it is. This is what I'm doing, right? I
Yeah.
knew that I wanted to use my voice, right? And I knew that I wanted to tell stories. I
Yeah.
didn't know when, but I knew that I was supposed to be on camera and I was supposed to be doing. And it's something about that. If we go back, and that's one of the exercises I love to do with people when we talk about your story. If we go back to when you were a little child, what was that thing inside you that you just felt, you just knew you were going to do? And somehow, some way that will show up, that shows up in your life in
Yes.
some way, shape, or form. So this book, which I'm telling you guys have to get, this book is good. I haven't had a chance to read all of it, but just from what I've read, I'm loving your story. Why this particular book at this time, Kevin?
Well, believe it or not, I work at a very upscale health club called Lifetime Athletics. March 2nd, 2019, I got struck in the head with a barbell and suffered a severe concussion. I spent 2 weeks in recovery, not being able to have sound, light, or anything else. The one day I was left to my own being, I went to my computer and it was almost like it was already set up for me. Normally I had to make a couple clicks, enter my password, open up my computer, and the document said Kevin Stuff. Open it up. The first document at the top of it was everything I need to learn about life. I learned high school football. It was my high school journal from 1973 to 2019. Every significant event in my life. And like I said, my memory for 2 weeks, I had nothing. I couldn't remember who was in my household, whatever. I was frightened of everyone. That was in that journal. I went through and I started writing it. And I came back and I asked someone, um, you know, who wrote this? Someone told me it was me. I said, this is my story. So without this book, my memory, what little bit of memory I have, I wouldn't have had. I did not know until I was that I had ADHD, and I was diagnosed at the age of 50. I went through my whole childhood, almost made it through college, and went to a great university, Central State University, great, one of the top 9 Black universities, and almost graduated from college, not being able to correctly read or write.
Wow.
Okay, but one of the things that I knew I could do, I can tell a story like no one else.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
that's the reason why I said from the 3rd grade on, my Uncle Bill, my grandfather, my cousin Ronnie, everyone kept telling me when I did stuff, you had greatness within you. We got to go out and get the world ready for you. I've told each of my children the same thing from the day that they came into this world, and I delivered one of them, that they had greatness. I had to go out and prepare the world for them. This book is my coming out card to every 6th grader, 7th grader, 8th grader that's preparing to enter high school and preparing for their life after high school. It's a map of saying you can live your life with excuses, or you can live your life creating experiences and memories that are for other people to follow.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh, that I love it. I love it. Definitely want to get this book. There's so much nuggets and of wisdom inside of it, and I'm so glad that we had a chance to connect, Kevin, because I definitely want to get you on for an hour by yourself and really talk about the book and dissect it, because there's something there for everyone. And our lived experiences, just as we've been saying with all the other guests, it's about sharing those experiences with others. Everything that you've gone through from the time you were 3 years old and everything, it's like it's a combination of experiences for you now to share and put in a book to impart to people, and that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
And part of this, and this is going to follow with the next young man that's following me. My grandfather used to always say he doesn't mind giving you a hand, but he won't haul you around for the rest of your life. Which is, when you look on my Facebook page, I say reach one, teach one. Yeah. I'm actually helping Raymond write his book. I was actually glad I went before him because the brother is so dynamic. I did not want to follow him because a lot of times when I'm talking to him, I had to open my eyes to see if I was talking to myself, because even though he's a great educator,